Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Ask the Unfaithful. I'm joined today by my great friend, mentor, hero, James Anir. How are you today, buddy?
Oh man, you really set me up there. I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Today, we are going to tackle probably one of the most scariest topics for the betrayed and also for the unfaithful. I'm sure you'll echo my sentiments in that I hope the unfaithful is nervous about this. And that is the question: is relapse a part of recovery? Now, for the listening audience or for the viewing audience, James and I would like to tell you that we understand this conversation can be unsettling and triggering. If you are early on in recovery, I would encourage you to take a deep breath. There is no guarantee that your partner will or will not relapse, but the discussion about relapse has to be part of the recovery process, right, James?
It really does. You know, nobody starts out in this wanting to relapse, and so it's really scary because if you relapse, now you're not perfect, and one of the problems with that is perfectionism. It's failure. It's a failure, right? And so perfectionism is actually an addictive or a compulsive value, right? It's something that, because it really comes down to, okay, it's a setup for failure.
For the sake of the chain of discussion today, if you're a betrayed, please understand, if someone just says to you, well, they're going to relapse, it's just part of it, we're going to talk about that today.
Yeah.
If someone says, oh, if there's a misstep, if there's a slip or any form of relapse, guaranteed failure of your relationship and your recovery work, absolutely not. But today we're going to take a stab at it in a way that is, as always, educational, redemptive, restorative, informational, and is hopeful. Because for those of you that have already relapsed, you understand what this is like. You understand what it did to yourself and what it did to your partner or spouse. If you are the betrayed and your spouse has relapsed once or multiple times, you understand the enormity of the pain, the agony, the despair, the hopelessness, the feeling like everything that you've worked so hard to restore is over. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But officially, James, as we launch out into the ocean waters of relapse, is relapse a part of recovery?
Well, yeah, if it happens, it is, right? so, uh, so again, you hope and work really hard for it not to happen, right? And there are people who begin recovery and do not have relapses. Let's put it this way: the people who are successfully do not relapse, successful in their recovery, are the ones who engage fully over a longer period of time and in larger amounts of treatment. So let's put it this way: if they white knuckle it, it's about 1%.
Right.
If they do 12-step programs, this is from the beginning, right? So no relapse from the beginning, because you can go back and it increases. So then 4%. Then with just one-on-one therapy, it's 20%. Then with treatment, it's between 30 and 40%. 1 year with step-down treatment, it's 80%.
Wow.
So that is huge, to say that if you commit to a process, to a program, to a treatment over a 1 year period, you're looking at an 80% recovery rate without relapse.
And that's why guys like us, or other women, of course, constantly shout from the hilltop of personal experience and education and walking people through this for 2+ decades. If you don't get help, you're white knuckling it. We're just going to sit here and wait for you to come back because we know relapse is coming. Rick Reynolds, a great friend and mentor of me, used to always say this: The guy that says, I'm good, I can go there, I can be around him or her, there's nothing to worry about, that guy or girl is going to relapse every time. The guy or the girl that says, oh, I'm not going there, can't be around that, that's unsafe, not going there, that person almost never relapses because they have humility. Because is it safe to say that relapse most often is about pride?
Pride goeth before the fall. Yeah, so pride, ego, right? So I think the way I put it, that Rick put it differently, is that anytime I hear the words "I got this," those I always say that's the death knell for any compulsive or addict.
Thank you. You're exactly right. Why do you got this? You didn't have it in the first place, but you got it now, right?
Right, exactly. Well, remember, our best thinking got us here, right? And then if we begin to believe what we think again, we're in deep trouble. So don't believe everything you think. Your mind is a moron.
I love that. So I'm going to point blanket for you because I know that people are thinking this, listening, driving, watching, running, mowing the lawn. They're all kind of wanting to know, what is relapse? So for someone like you, who's an expert, been doing this forever with his wife, has had his own recovery, how do you define relapse?
So anytime that you cross what's known as your bottom lines, so this is a list of things that you absolutely cannot do, and they have to be concrete, right, and agreed upon, right, between you and your mentor, your sponsor, whatever that looks like, right, and your partner, right, your spouse, your partner. That has to be agreed upon, because otherwise we can delude ourselves. Oh, well, I'm not going to watch porn. I'm not going to go to strip clubs. I'm not going to hire prostitutes. I'm not going to have affairs. Okay, great. Those are my bottom lines. Well, is your partner comfortable with you talking about emotional things with another person that isn't your partner? Right? Oh, so it kind of, there has to be that input, right? So it has to be agreed upon.
It has to be, the word that comes to my mind is collaborative, right? That
Yes.
says, well, maybe it's not porn or sex workers or things like that. Maybe it's he or she had an affair with a coworker and now they work in the same building. Maybe they're on different floors, maybe they're on the same floor. What does the betrayed feel like is relapse? Is it talking to them? Is it communicating? Right. So I love the idea that it has to be collaborative. This is not just I, the unfaithful, male or female, dictate my own world of what's safe and what's not, because get ready, destruction is coming.
Yep.
But to me, and you always do this so well, but to me, it's a beautiful picture of the betrayed and the unfaithful saying, let's establish a bottom line. Let's do this together. You have lived a private life, a double life. I can no longer tolerate that. To me, it strikes me as a beautiful picture that they both would say, let's decide what a bottom line is. Let's decide what cannot be acceptable for us to move forward. Am I right?
You're right. I'm going to throw out the word of caution that, you know, this needs to be done with professional help. And the reason, or, you know, well, first of all, I established mine with a sponsor, right? And they grew over time as we discovered more things that needed to be on the bottom line. And they weren't necessarily precise acting out things that you could identify easily, but they were things that could be taken off sort of the accessory or boundary behaviors that could lead me into acting out and put into the bottom lines, right? So
Right.
you envision three circles. Carnes does this, where you have the bottom lines in the center. That's like, we call it the no zone. Then the middle, which is sort of like red, amber, green, right? Like a stoplight. Middle one is those things that if we engage in them, they could take us into the center pretty easily. Then you got the top lines on the outside that give you an action plan that keep you in health, right? So Bottom line wise, those have to be established with somebody who knows who knows the path, and then partner gets input on it in case there's something that that person doesn't know because they haven't been told. And it may be that they haven't been told because the person's withholding it, or because they just don't know.
Right.
Right? They're not aware of it.
I think you're so right, because when people come to me for help, one of the first things I do, either at the beginning or the end, is I say, look, I am so proud of you for getting help, because we have such a DIY mentality that I don't need help. I'll go watch some videos. There's this lunatic Sam. He makes videos on, YouTube. I'll just go watch them and DIY it. Listen, I love doing what I do. My videos, I'm gonna say some of them are fantastic, and some of them we have some really bad hair, but the content is still good. But
Really
you
bad
you
hair.
can't survive on videos alone. You need somebody. For 12-step people, it's a sponsor. For people that are not in 12 steps, it's a mentor, it's a coach, it's a therapist, because we think that we can just do it on our own. And we look like, quite honestly, now, for those of you listening or those of you watching, take a deep breath. But if you're an unfaithful and you think that you got this and that you can do it, you were never supposed to do this in the first place. What makes you think that you're going to prevent it from happening again? Well, I'm more aware now, but you still have the crap inside of you that caused you. You still have the massive avoidance that you utilized. Instead of dealing with the issues, you chose porn or your affair partner or everything else under the sun.
So you talk about DIY, right? And I have had to, my dad was not a DIYer, so I had to teach myself how to do a lot of things, and I'm not especially good at it. But one of the quotes I heard recently was, "All the gear, but no idea."
So
So
good.
I've got all the stuff, right? All the tools, but no idea. So here's the thing, but often
Exactly
when
right.
we're in this, we don't have all the tools, right? And we still have no idea. And we just plunge into it going, okay, well, I'll just stop doing that. Yeah, there's a lot more things that drive that behavior that we need to become aware of. And that is a therapy thing, right? But it
Yeah.
is also, I love 12 step, and a lot of people don't want to identify as an addict. There is Sexual Compulsives Anonymous. So there you're identifying as compulsive. Now, I've never been to one of those meetings because I'm an addict. So I don't know how effective they are. However, they are 12 step based, and there's nothing wrong. I think everybody needs 12 steps, because guess what? There are things we can't control. There are things that, we have to give over, or we have to trust other people, or trust our higher power, and then taking an inventory gives us the information we need, right? So all those things are fantastic for everybody in the world.
You just said something, taking inventory, which is part of this 12 steps. You said this the other day when we were talking. You said, when there's a relapse, the couple, but also the individual, has to do a relapse autopsy
Right.
to find out what went on. Talk more about that. I love the verbiage, because the autopsy speaks of being able to say what happened. Because if we just think, oh, I just won't do it again, or if we just kind of bypass that moment, there's a saying, you never waste a good crisis, and you never waste a relapse.
Right. So if a relapse happens, which, I pray it doesn't, I want everybody out there to be able to start this and never look back. If it happens, you have to figure out why. So basically, there can be, if you have a program going, which everybody needs to. So a program is basically something where you are following a process or a set of rules, basically, or guidelines that help you stay out of this. So it's essentially, if this is acting out down here, now you're building layers of things above it, right? And so knowledge, breaking, Carnes calls it breaking through denial, so that you can accept it fully, right? And then there's knowledge, education. Then there's, wow, what's making me do this? So triggers. but if triggers can be mental, emotional, spiritual, really what it comes down to when we relapse, and please bring me back to the autopsy, is this concept of, do I exist, right? Because you're gonna see the Batman therapist now. You can't see my feet, but when we're going towards recovery, we're kind of like in a swamp, right? And so we look down and there's a tuft of grass. We don't know if that step is going to be solid. We might sink right up to here in the swamp. But if we've got people guiding us, they can say, yes, I've been there. That's a solid tuft of grass. And then we're like this. And there's fear with every step, right? Relapse or being in addiction or compulsion looks like this. It's like John Travolta in Saturday Night Fever, you know?
Yeah.
Why? It's not fun, but we know that that is solid. So when we relapse, it's like the drunk lying and waking up in the gutter, right? So the drunk's waking up in the gutter and he goes, oh, okay, well, I'm real, I exist, right? It's horrible. It's the most horrible feeling in the world to relapse. And yet, why do we do it? It proves to us that we exist, because walking on those tufts of grass in the swamp, we're so nervous. Who are we in this? We've never been in recovery before, so we have no idea. We're discovering who we are, and it's scary, man. And so when stressors become too much or we get triggered, those things can lead us right into the, oh my God, I've got to feel real.
Let me ask you something. We didn't talk about this. I saw this meme the other day. It resonated with me. Do you think it's fair to say sometimes we would choose relapse in this discussion because that feels more familiar than sobriety? That feels more familiar to relapse than the unfamiliar, which is living in a way that says, I've got to stay away from these things. Do you think there's truth to that?
There is, because that's exactly what I was describing there, right?
Yeah.
That walking down the street, like, you know this. It's very familiar. It is it can feel good initially because it's euphoric recall, right? So euphoric recall.
Thank you, because we're going to need a definition for that. So give us euphoric recall.
Do you remember it was actually a Maxell ad with the guy leaning back and the stereo leaning back, right?
I couldn't forget that thing if you tried. Yes, I remember that ad
it's called
yesterday.
Blown Away, and I think it's Seligman or something took the photo. Well, I did like a little ad, right? Which actually I didn't post because I can't use that image. I made it into Memorex, who were big at the time, and I called it Euphorex, because if you think of that image, that's what it's blowing us away, right? With all this, whoa, everything's great. Well, euphoric recall is when we have the memory of the high, but we discard, because defensively, that we protect ourselves from the memory of the really big lows surrounding that. Right? All we remember is the high. Oh, wow, that was so great. Right? And so that is euphoric recall. So when we're kind of tripping down the street like Saturday Night Fever, heading towards disaster, we are in a euphoric state, right? Because all we were remembering is the high from it. Right? And so that's euphoric recall.
And we're not safe. We're not connected. We're not everybody's an addict, obviously, but we're not really sober. We're rolling the dice with our recovery. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a quote I really love. I kind of changed it a little bit, but I'll try to remember it exactly. It's an author named Mark Frost from a book called The List of Seven, which has nothing to do with what we're talking about at all. But he said, the first step along the road to ruin is easier to resist than the 1,000 which will inevitably follow. It's just such a beautiful quote, because it says, okay, I can this, if I've got this in my bottom lines, that makes it easy. This is what I cannot do. Has to be concrete. You cannot help a fantasy that comes into your head, but you can help what you do with it, right? You can't help a person showing up where you don't expect them, but you can help what you do with that.
That's exactly right. Uh, I believe in that 1,000%. And I want to throw out another little caveat. Some of you might be unfaithful or you might be addicts and you're trying to develop some bottom lines, and maybe your partner or your spouse has said, I don't care. That doesn't mean that you can't develop bottom lines for yourself. You shared something one day that I thought was really beautiful. You can't go into the whole thing today, but you just made mention of how when we live outside of our own excuse me, let me say it again. When we live outside of our own integrity, we are hurting ourselves and we are hurting all of the loved ones in our life, right?
Yeah. So integrity, it can be really overwhelming because it can be looked at as, well, now I have to know exactly who I am. So the starting place with it is, hey, let's do a little values work. What are my values, right?
Right.
And and am I living outside of those values, right? And when I step outside of those values, now I'm creating dissonance, a cognitive dissonance. I'm creating conflict internally, which will result in anxiety, big anxiety. When we get into big anxiety, guess what? We go farther into stepping outside of our integrity if we
Mhm.
act out sexually or emotionally, romantically. And then our tendency will be to go in that direction. Right. So
Yeah.
the best way to avoid internal conflict is to stay within your value set. So I like the very simple question that this wonderful Jungian author James Hollis puts it: if I'm making a decision, will this enhance me or will it diminish me?
I think it's huge. I love that. I think it's, man, if we could all remember that about so many choices. I mean, from the minutia to the grand scale things about what we eat, what we watch, where we go, where we spend our time, what we drink. So I don't think that we could do this discussion without ending in a way, though, that's very hopeful, that says, what or how do you develop a relapse prevention plan? You and Sharon, you put on intensives. You've been walking people through this for decades. You've had your own recovery, as have I. I have my relapse prevention plan. Excuse me. I know when I'm exhausted, when I'm overworked, when I am struggling with fear,
Mhm.
I'm not safe. I'm going to call a buddy. I've got 4 buddies I can call at any time, including you. I'm going to text them. I'm going to watch what I'm eating, what I'm drinking, how much sleep am I getting. I'm going to watch my social media interaction. I'm going to, God help us, if it's like it is now in Austin, Texas, I'm going to sit by a fire and really ground myself. I'm going to stay close to my care team. Now, that's someone that's got almost 20 years of recovery work, or actually 20 years of recovery work, who is working hard and helping other people. But if you don't have a plan, you plan to fail, right? So, what does a general relapse prevention plan look like?
So you outlined it beautifully. You did.
Hey,
So
I
you
feel
said,
good about
okay,
myself. I wasn't even trying to, but let's go, Sam. We got one right today.
so perhaps more, my brain, right, works a little differently. So um,
I'm here for eye candy. That's why you're here, James, to break it down.
well, you're not getting eye candy on this end, my friend. Although, I did give myself a haircut today.
Well done. Well done.
All right. So really, you have to think of it again in those layers, right? So if acting out is the thing you're trying to prevent, right? Then you need to have layers over that. So part of the layer, we've talked about knowledge, right? Just having knowledge about what makes up compulsion and addiction, right? And then knowing your own history, right? Your own patterns, the things that got you into trouble, the people, places, things that are not good for you to be involved with, right?
Hmm.
The things that can trigger you, right? Knowing your triggers, your urges, knowing your patterns. Those are all things that you need to, if you know those things, you can take the steps to avoid them or mitigate them if you can't avoid them, right? Then your layer of community, right?
Right.
Other people that you know who have like experience, who are in recovery, right? This is where it really breaks down for compulsives, except for SCA, right? Where they don't want to identify as an addict because it limits the amount of community they can have, which is sad to me, right? So but having community, having a mentor, having therapist, it's another layer. Therapist, group therapy is unbelievable because not only do you have those like experience, you've got people who are actually, you've got somebody who's leading it and helping you go through the therapy, right? Go
And you're
through the
sitting,
whys.
and you're not just going like all the jokes back in the 90s and the early 2000s, right? The joke was, oh, I acted out this week. Oh, I did too. I guess we're okay. No, it's being able to go, man, you're going through a lot, dude. If you need a friend or a brother,
Yep.
I'm here. Let me support you. Or being able to open up. I love when I'm meeting with my clients, I'll look on Google Calendar. They'll tell me, D days in 3 days, or,
Yep.
it's our birthday or whatever. I put a note on my calendar because I don't want them to feel alone in that moment. And the
Yep.
reason being, and I'll be really gut level honest with you, I could do a podcast just on this, but I remember going through some really difficult times after my affair became public and we moved to Austin, Texas. I knew one person. That guy eventually moved back to the state that I came from. I had nobody. I lived so alone. I had my wife and kids, thank God, but I knew nobody. And then one by one, I developed some friends and some safety. But man, that feeling of being alone can be so gut wrenching for the betrayed as well as the unfaithful.
Yeah.
And so having a care team is probably, in my opinion, one of the most important facets of a recovery process is all of the ingredients that you just mentioned. Well, Sam, I don't know anybody. I get it. Go join a group and find somebody. Go look for someone in a group. There's so many different websites where you can join groups or get on group walls or what have you. You can reach out to us here and we'll point you in the direction of where you might be able to find people to support you. Because without a care team, man, you are trying to be Rambo. And history has proven time and time again, those that take the Rambo approach continue to relapse
Yep.
and can devastate not just their own selves, but their spouse, their partner, and their children, everyone caught in the crosshairs. Am I right?
Absolutely. I think that one thing that's really important, and I think we mentioned this before, not today, but is that your support team has to be full of people who will challenge you.
Yeah.
They can't simply co-sign your stuff. They can't simply say yes. Oh, yeah, you're absolutely right. You have to have people who will challenge you lovingly, gently, not in a shaming way.
Absolutely.
Absolutely to challenge you, because otherwise all they're doing is co-signing your own thinking process, which we cannot trust it, or especially early on, right? We have to learn how to think in recovery, in a recovery way.
Yeah.
So we talked a bit before this about the autopsy, and I just wanted to make sure we wrap that up so that people aren't kind of left
Right.
in that. So where I got off track was really talking about having to have a program or a process that you're following, guidelines, right? And so when we do the autopsy, it's what went wrong, what
Yeah.
did you not do, right? Was there a place in that process where something didn't happen, right? And if that's not identifiable, that means something has to be added in,
Yeah.
There also has to be this, it is devastating to the person who relapses as well as their partner,
Yeah.
right? When there's a relapse, the devastation that one can feel can be highly shaming. So one of the big things is, okay, we're going to work on this. We're going to work on not self-shaming. We're going to work on getting back on this horse and riding, not ignoring what happened, because that's really important. So identifying what triggers were happening, what stressors were happening that led me down
Yeah.
the path of, oh, I can't do this, and wanting to feel better, or escape. What
Yeah.
triggers, what urges were coming up, what thoughts, what feelings, right? Um, what behaviors, because
Yeah.
relapse is always preceded by a lot of stuff that are indicative that there's a problem. So the
Mm.
more we learn about that, the more we can prevent it from happening in the first place. So where are we minimizing? Where are we rationalizing, intellectualizing, justifying? Do what I call the ings, right?
Yeah. I
Um,
think it's,
what were the
but
people, places, and things? Sorry.
yeah. No, I think you're so spot on. As we say goodbye today, for those of you that are listening or watching, I hope that you have heard the underlying message, which is there is hope, even if there's been relapse. James said it beautifully. We hope that there's not. For those that come from faith, we pray that there is not. But sometimes there is. And even if there is relapse, it doesn't mean it's the end of the road. For some, it may actually be the end of the road because there have been so many relapses. It reveals a lack of desire, a lack of commitment, a lack of safety, and that betrayed. If you're listening and you're betrayed, you may just say, "Look, I can't do this anymore." And anybody that's been through this would say, "We get it,
Yep,
we understand."
absolutely.
But if you're an unfaithful today, and maybe you have relapsed, maybe there's been multiple times, I hope and I pray that you will take the wisdom that you have heard today and execute it, implement it into your life. Because if you can, it just may save your life and save your recovery and save the lives of those that are around you. We never know the extent of the consequences of our choices. I sat with a guy today who was talking about his affair, and now his children know about it. And everything was going okay. And now his kids know, and everything has spiraled. And it's a layer of consequences that we have to embrace. It doesn't mean that his relationship with his kids is over,
Nope.
but it is a moment to say, look, dude, your choices have consequences. How you respond to those consequences means everything. So, James, I said my goodbye. Your last couple of thoughts for those that are watching and listening today.
I love what you said about, there are consequences. Consequences, though, people think they're always negative, and they don't have to be. It's really hard in the middle of a consequence to be able to see what you can change it into, what you can use it for. As you gain
Right.
distance from it, you can start to see it as an opportunity. We've had plenty of clients whose children have either discovered or been disclosed to, depending on the age, of course, and age appropriately. But when they're adult children, in the ones I'm thinking of, those relationships have actually they went through some really difficult times, but now they are much stronger than they were before, because this
Right.
is, wow, suddenly dad's real or mom's real, right? And then they're able to see what they're doing in recovery, and that can really be something that is very inspiring. So there's that. Also, do not give up.
Yeah.
Whatever happens, if a partner says, "Okay, I'm done. I can't handle it," for the unfaithful, do not give up. I'm not saying about your partnership or your marriage. What I'm saying is about your own recovery, because this is vital for you to live a full and realized life.
Yeah.
And so I will say to partners, whatever your choice, become you again, become fully you. You have it's horrible. And you have this opportunity to embrace you and who you are, and really live for you.
Absolutely. We just want to thank you for tuning in today, whether you were watching or listening. And you can reach us at asktheunfaithful@gmail.com. We answer our email ourselves. We care about what we do. We would love to hear from you. If we can point you in the right direction, if you would like to consider booking a session with James or myself, by all means, use that email address. We'll get back to you, typically within 24 hours. And as we say goodbye, listen, you are worth the effort. You are worth the recovery process. You're worth every dollar that you spend on your recovery. You are worth every prayer, every scream, every agonizing venting session that you have about where your life is at. You're worth it. So don't give up. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.